A lot of people picture a scared kid with a candy bar under their jacket, and you get that, but the majority of it is seasoned shoplifters going out with carts full of beer and liquor and hygiene products and electronics and laundry detergent, etc. His frustration isn't so much with the thieves, per se, but instead with how his former company has dealt with them, which would mean more work for employees but would also have increased safety. But these solutions would all cost money the company was apparently not willing to dole out.
Throughout history, people have sought answers about the unknown. But predicting fates and futures hasn't always been synonymous. Food has long been used for predictive purposes, perhaps due to its accessibility. Think of the reading of tea leaves or telling fortunes with Turkish coffee. Though each society has its own versions of food divination, shape interpretation is the common ingredient in countless fortunes told. Though no one knows exactly when tyromancy originated, it seemed like a fun way to tell fortunes that also ended up being delicious.
I look for shapes or symbols in the cheese, any ridges, holes, rind bits or crystallization. As examples, a heart shape means love, an arrow means a journey, an image of a dog means companionship, a baby means change is coming. The meaning of the amount of mold depends on what else is going on in the cheese and if it's in a particular shape or arrangement. Then I interpret. As soon as it was deemed medically safe, a physical or occupational therapist would visit each and every patient. We cared for patients with every imaginable problem.
Sometimes there were weeks when you were advised not to open your windows or exercise outside. Sometimes there were long stretches where you weren't supposed to breathe the outside. They wanted to talk about how strange and disorienting. He was a biology major before his fascination with human behavior turned him towards social work, those interests as separate from the profession he would eventually choose. They came from a variety of clinical backgrounds and orientations. Trainings had covered issues like climate change or environmental anxiety.
When he thought of climate change as primarily a problem of the future. When he heard or read about troubling impacts, he found himself setting them in 2080, a year that, not so coincidentally, would be a century after his own birth. The changing climate, and all the challenges it would bring, were scary and sad. Where Bryant is a clinical social worker and psychotherapist treating patients in private practice in Seattle, is a largely affluent place that was once considered a potential refuge from climate disruption. We are lucky to have the opportunity to look away.
This did not mean, however, that the search for the mother tongue of humankind ceased. Scholars simply no longer assumed that it was a matter of celestial benefaction. The enterprise continued at the margins of official learning. The torch had passed. Only at the end of the 20th century, mainly in the United States and Soviet Union, would the project return with an air of general respectability, now in the context of advances in the fields of paleontology and human origins. What if certain, exceptionally high mountains had escaped the flood altogether?
Companies can be quick to blame shrink on external theft, but it might be employees who are stealing, or merchandise that's lost in transit. It's a hardware. Loss prevention typically is the most underfunded department of any company. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that this is a tough nut to crack. Organized retail crime operations made up of boosters, people who steal the goods, and fences, those who purchase or receive, sometimes with a manufactured receipt in his hand, and get into an Uber or Lyft he'd ordered.
The store over and over, loading up on fragrances, and walking out the door. She finds empty ink cartridge packages lying around almost every shift, their contents having been lifted. She and her co-workers get lectured over it, but what are they supposed to do? Employers actively encourage them not to be, as situations can turn dangerous and even deadly. Mark, a loss prevention specialist who has worked for companies. One is more glamorous and more showy, while the other, focusing on shrink, you're attacking your business model and your operational spend.
He recalls watching a security video of a man cutting into a merchandise case, looking around as he committed the crime and seemingly noticing there was nobody in the department around to see him. He says new cashiers often fall for scams with gift cards at the register because they haven't been properly trained, and self-checkout aisles go woefully underwatched because the store doesn't have the labor budget to staff them. Walmart's really going heavy on the technology side of it right now, but all the upgraded tracking systems and computers in the world.
Some amount of shoplifting is always going to happen. Shrink retail speak for missing inventory that may have been stolen by outside parties or its own workers, damaged, or just plain lost is inevitable. According to the National Retail Federation, the average shrink rate increased from 1.4% in 2021 to 1.6% in 2022. Taken as a percentage of sales, that translates to an increase from $93.9 billion to $112.1 billion in losses. That's a big number. It's also one that companies could take more steps to bring down, workers say.